Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari, and he is USA Today boxing junkie editor Michael Rosenthal, back for another week of sweet science chatter. We've got lots to unpack on today's episode. Trainer extraordinaire Derrick James will join us a little later. We're going to take a look back at last Saturday's action on Showtime and look ahead to Saturday night's PBC on Fox cards. Plus, on today's toe-to-toe segment, we're going to be discussing the most underused weapons in boxing today and debate who is the world's best super middleweight. But first things first, we're getting closer and closer to Saturday, September 26th, a PBC Showtime pay-per-view featuring 5 world title bouts, an unprecedented double header, all for the price of one. Now, the first 3-match segment begins at 7 p.m. Eastern Time and will be headlined by undefeated WBC world middleweight champion Jermell Charlo taking on former world title challenger Sergey Derevyanchenko in what could be a career-defining fight for either one of those guys, for the winner. Now, on the undercard, undefeated Brandon Figueroa puts his WBA World Super Bantamweight title on the line versus Damian Vasquez. And in the opener, WBO World Bantamweight Champion John Real Casimero is going to be facing undefeated Duke Micah in what the Brits would call a cracker of a fight. And then we move to the second half of the doubleheader. There'll be a little intermission in between. Now, the main event of the second half is explosive. 2 of the biggest punchers in the game, a 154-pound world title unification as WBC champion Jermell Charlo faces WBA and IBF champion Jason Rosario. Preceding that is undefeated Luis Nery against Aaron Alameda. That's for the vacant WBC World Super Bantamweight belt. And kicking things off, former unified 122-pound champion Danny Roman faces another former world champion in Juan Carlos Payano. Mike, you got 2 A-list names in career-defining bouts. The Charlo twins, of course. 3 other world championship matches. When was the last time we saw an entire card this stacked?
Well, as I've said, it reminds me of the Don King cards of the 1990s. I looked up one of those cards. Check this out. These were the fights on a 1994 card in Las Vegas. Julio Cesar Chavez versus Frankie Randall, Gerald McClellan versus Julian Jackson, Simon Brown versus Terry Norris, Azuma Nelson versus Jesse James Leija, and Ricardo Lopez and Meldrick Taylor fought on the card. Hall of Famers were fighting in like the 4th and 5th fights on the cards. And we're never going to see cards quite like that again. But the fact that we're even talking about that, in relation to the Charlo brothers cards, is really saying something. I mean, we generally don't even see pay-per-view cards with 2 fights as compelling as Charlo Rosario and Charlo Derevyanchenko. Add the Brandon Figueroa, Damian Vasquez, in the other fights that you mentioned, and you obviously have some value. We'll see what kind of pay-per-view numbers this show does. I mean, these are hard times, but it's definitely a stacked card.
Yeah, totally. And I was trying to think back and remember when was the last time there was a card this stacked. And Mayweather Canelo was pretty good. I know that Danny Garcia versus Lucas Matisse was on the other card, but even that wasn't as deep. I go as far back as 2003, December 13, 2003, and it was another Don King card, John Ruiz versus Hasim Rahman in the main event. But check out this undercard. Corey Spinks versus Ricardo Mayorga for the undisputed welterweight championship. Bernard Hopkins versus William Joppy for the undisputed middleweight championship. Rosendo Alvarez versus Jose Victor Burgos, and had 2 titles on the line for that. Wayne Braithwaite versus Luis Pineda. The WBC cruiserweight title was on the line for that. Travis Sims versus Alejandro Garcia. WBC super welterweight title was on the line for that. Luis Alberto Perez versus Felix Machado. World super flyweight IBF belt was on the line for that. And in the opener, Zab Judah versus Jaime Rangel for the WBO 140-pound world title. So, crazy. I mean, what is that? 8 world title bouts on one card. I mean, that's just just ridiculous when you think about it. And you're right. I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again, but this is 5 world title bouts with 2 huge names in the last, in the two different headliners. So it's amazing. But one common thread in researching this is Don King and how he used to put on pay-per-views like this. I mean, what do you think happened and why did it stop?
I think today, usually the A-side fighter, excuse me, commands so much money that pretty much takes up most of the budget. I mean, guys like De La Hoya and Mayweather and Pacquiao commanded just gargantuan pay-per-view purses. So it kind of all went to them with, obviously some to the opponent. King was able to divvy up the money to all these great fighters. And they were happy to take it at that time. It wasn't as much as the other guys were making, but it was a lot of money. Of course, King took a little bit for himself. Those were the days. I think they're gone. But again, going back to this card, it's something. It's something different.
Yeah, I guess he was able to do it because he didn't pay them. That's what I was thinking. But hey, I mean, the reality is that it's amazing that he was able to do that. And I think it speaks volumes that we haven't seen a card this good since George Bush II or Bill Clinton was in office. Now, we're going to be discussing it more in the coming weeks and a little later in this episode with Derrick James. But another bit of news I thought was interesting was last Saturday. I'm sure a lot of you guys on boxing social media saw what happened between Israel Madrimov and Eric Walker. Now, Madrimov is undefeated 154-pound prospect, was heavily touted, and facing Walker in what was supposed to be a walkover. He won a unanimous decision, didn't look that great, which was part of the story. But the second part was that in the 9th round, Madrimov landed a huge left hook that dropped Walker. I mean, Walker was down and out. There was a little shove or a little something, I don't know, that happened after the left hook landed. And for some reason, the referee decided that was reason enough not to call it a knockdown. And instead of it being a knockout victory for Madrimov, Walker had several minutes to recover from the shot, and the fight resumed. Now, obviously, Madrimov went on to win the fight, but what should have been a KO win ended up being a decision win. Boxing, Twitter, boxing, Instagram, boxing, YouTube obviously was flummoxed by the decision. And Mike, I imagine you were too.
Yeah, it was very strange. Yeah, he nailed him, like you said, with the left hook, and his momentum sort of carried his body into Walker to some degree, and he went down. And I guess what the referee decided is that he wouldn't have gone down if it weren't for the collision of the bodies. He obviously got it wrong. I mean, you have to, maybe he had a bad angle or something like that. But if you watch, I watched on TV, or on the stream, if you watch it that way, you could see that he was on his way down already when the bodies collided. So yeah, he got it wrong. It seems to me that the criteria for a knockdown is pretty clear. I mean, if you nail him with a punch and he goes down, it's a knockdown. I understand this complicated things. Maybe you should have a situation where an official at ringside who has a different angle can overrule the referee when he could see it clearly. Maybe instant replay can play a role, but they got it wrong. But what happened afterward was worse, because Walker was hurt badly. He lay there for like almost a minute, and somehow they let the fight go on, which was just insane. They did not take care of this guy at all. So it was just a mess from beginning to end. It was a very strange moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking in that case, would instant replay even help, because the guy was basically knocked out?
Yeah. I don't know the logistics in instant replay in that case. You'd have to look at it instantaneously and make a decision, which would have been different. Although they had time. Yeah. I mean, they could have done it. Yeah, they could have done it. But I think maybe in that case, it would have been more appropriate for another official. Maybe you had a better angle to say, listen, it's supposed to be the ruling. The referee's supposed to make the ruling. But when the referee doesn't have a good angle and I see exactly what happened, maybe a commissioner or something like that should be able to overrule him. That to me is just common sense. I don't know if it falls within the rules necessarily of that commission, but it's just common sense. They got it wrong, and if they should have gotten it right. So, I mean, whatever it takes to get it right.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I just terrible call. I mean, we've seen this before. Two examples come to mind. One, Bernard Hopkins versus Felix Trinidad, where Hopkins landed that right hook in the 12th round, and then he sort of shoved Trinidad on the way down. Now, I was a huge Trinidad fan, so I believe Hopkins should have been disqualified on the spot for that. No, I mean, in all seriousness, Hopkins was dominating the fight, and that was rightly ruled a knockdown. Now, same thing when Lennox Lewis fought Mike Tyson, 9th round or 8th round, I'm not sure, but he landed a big right hand and sort of helped him on the way down, leaned on him, and kind of pushed him down, and that was rightly ruled a knockdown. This one was even more egregious than those two. You could barely see anything other than that left hook landing. I mean, the guy was out soon as it landed. So not quite sure what the referee saw there, but certainly something's got to give in boxing before we see that happen in one of the bigger fights. But it's time to move on to the next part of our show, and we're going to get right into the PBC Fight of the Week. This Saturday, August 22nd, one of the welterweight elites returns to the ring. Two-time world champion Showtime Shawn Porter takes on undefeated Sebastian Formella in a 12-round welterweight title eliminator on Fox PBC Fight Night. Mike, let's have the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Porter last fought September 28th of last year. That was a split decision loss in that barn burner against Errol Spence. Formella last fought December 28th. He outpointed somebody named Roberto Ariaza. Porter is 33-1 with 17 knockouts. Formella 22-0 with 10. Porter's 4-1 with 1 knockout in his last 5. The loss was to Spence. Obviously, Formella's 5-0. He's two knockouts in those fights. Porter 50% knockout percentage. Formella 45. Porter's fought a lot of rounds, 231 rounds, just tons of experience. Formella has some experience too, 145 rounds. Porter's 32. Formella's 33. Porter fights from an orthodox stance. Formella from a southpaw stance. Porter's 5'7". Formella will have a height advantage. He's 5'11". 69.5-inch reach for Porter, and I could not find a reach for Formella, which is a bad sign for him. When you can't find a reach, a guy's in trouble. And I'm just adding a couple more things, give a little bit of background. Porter's lives in Vegas now for quite some time. Formella's from Hamburg in Germany. Porter turned pro in 2008. Interesting, Formella didn't turn pro until 2014 when he was 26 years old. So there you have it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not know that. It's an interesting style pairing when you look at their dimensions. And you mentioned Formella being from Germany. Obviously, not a lot of people know much about him. So, Mike, what can you tell us about Formella?
I mean, to be honest, not too much. I mean, I did some research. There isn't that much. Now, I did, he's fought outside his native country only one time, and that was in Sweden. So he's basically stuck to home, which makes it more difficult to get information. But I did watch some videos of him fighting. He seems like a solid boxer, pretty good athlete. Actually, he moved pretty well. Not much of a puncher, although, again, you never know. Guy lands the punch just right. He could hurt anybody. He seems like a solid guy. But in the case of Formella and a lot of guys in that position where you don't see a guy like that very much, it's kind of hard to gauge exactly what he brings.
Yeah, I was talking to Shawn Porter the other day, and he told me Formella, I guess from what he saw on tape, that Formella doesn't like to fight on the inside at all, that his style isn't one you see much of in the pros, and that he's going to have to make adjustments while being the aggressor. Now, if Porter's going to be what Porter is, and typically that's the aggressor, as I just mentioned, do you think Formella's style plays into his hands, or could it pose some problems for Shawn?
I hadn't thought much about the style matchup, to be honest with you. I just kept thinking about Porter just swarming. This guy's never seen anything like Porter in his life. Yeah. I'm just thinking about Porter just swarming him, and he doesn't have the power, probably doesn't have the ability to keep Porter off of him for long. I think Porter is just gonna land more and more punches as the fight progresses and just wear this kid down. But again, who knows? I mean, sometimes these guys surprise you. Maybe they have a little bit more than you realize, but at the moment, I don't see it.
Yeah, obviously he's never fought at this level before, and it's going to be a interesting experience for him. We'll see if he rises to the occasion. Now, another thing that Shawn and I discussed is that there's a real possibility, if you think about it, that at this point next year, he just might end up being the number one welterweight in the world. I mean, there's still questions about Errol Spence, obviously. We haven't seen him since that car accident last year. We saw how him and Shawn fought tooth and nail prior to that car accident. Now, Spence is fighting Danny Garcia November 21st on Fox Sports pay-per-view. Shawn already beat Danny Garcia. Shawn lost a nail biter to Keith Thurman in a fight I'd love to see again. That was in 2016. A lot's changed since then. You also have Terrence Crawford, but he still hasn't beaten a top welterweight yet. I mean, why not Shawn, Mike? He stays disciplined. He's added a lot to his game over the years. I could see him being that top guy when the dust clears.
I absolutely agree with that. I think it's definitely possible that he could emerge on top. I suppose you could say that with a lot of guys who are right near the top of the rankings. But in his case, I think there's a chance of that. A couple guys lose. Maybe Spence loses. Maybe somebody else loses. Porter gets a shot against this guy, or he gets a shot against that guy. You combine these losses and these victories, and suddenly Porter's on top. It's definitely a possibility, and he's right there. So he just needs to keep winning, and who knows what's going to happen.
Now, interesting. I was just thinking about that when I was thinking about how Porter could emerge. Let's say he fights Keith Thurman again. Who do you think wins that?
Porter.
Really? Why? What's changed since 2016?
I still not convinced that Thurman is the same fighter with the injuries. And then it's sort of his performance against Pacquiao, which was okay. It was solid, but that sort of reinforced my perspective. I just think there's something off there a little bit. Now, maybe this time is given, maybe this time out of boxing because of the pandemic has given him time to heal 100%. Maybe he'll come back and the injuries will be in his past. But at the moment, I don't see it. And I saw what I saw when Porter fought Spence. When Porter was just an absolute freaking beast. I think he's at least near the top of his game. So for that reason, I just think that I think Porter beats him this time, and I think he beats him clearly.
Wow, that's a bold prediction right there. But I see where you're coming from, and obviously we need to see where Keith is at, because that was a grueling fight for him back in 2016, and I don't know if Thurman has looked as good since then. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see any of these welterweight fights, including the rematches. So we'll see what happens. Now, there's a excellent co-feature on this card, a 154-pound bout between Sebastian Fundora and Nathaniel Gallimore. Intriguing style matchup, just like the main event, even more so than the main event, if you ask me. Now, Mike, do you think Fundora may be biting off more than he can chew here? He's facing a hard-hitting veteran in Gallimore.
Yes, I think I just tipped off my prediction. I still don't know quite what to make of Fundora. The guy is Anthony Joshua's height, and he's a 154-pounder. So just that in itself it's just hard to fathom. He's a tough kid, and pretty talented. I really think he's a good fighter. I just think this is a very, very serious test for him. Gallimore is a capable veteran with a lot of power. He stopped Jason Rosario in 2017. I mean, that to me says a lot. He gave Julian Williams problems in defeat. Now, he lost a wide decision to Eric Lubin in his last fight. Maybe that's a sign that he's slipping a little bit. I really don't know. Still, Fundora will be making a statement if he gets past this guy.
Yeah, it's such a huge step up for Fundora. Such a dangerous fight. Look, he ate a lot of shots in his draw versus Javante Clark last August. He can't take those kind of shots against Nathaniel Gallimore. But I like Fundora. For starters, I love his nickname, the Towering Inferno. And it's hard not to root for a guy who's 6'5", 6'6", 154 pounds, and still gets in there and trades like he's Mike Tyson. So it's time to make our predictions. Mike and I are both 12-4 in our prediction leagues, and we're going to be making 2 picks today. First one, Porter versus Formella. Who do you like?
Again, I'm pretty sure that Formella hasn't seen anything quite like Porter, whether that's in the gym or in actual fight, Porter's just going to be all over him from beginning to end whenever that comes. I think he breaks down Formella and stops him around the 7th round.
Okay. I like that prediction. I'm going to go with the 10th round. I think it'll take a little longer, but I think Porter's going to attack. He's going to use angles. He's going to wear him down, and he's going to beat him up. I think Porter's going to look really, really good. I heard he looks fantastic in the gym, and he just seems to be getting better. He's defying Father Time. Now, what about the co-feature? Who do you got in that?
You mentioned Fundora's the fact that he enjoys fighting inside in spite of his height. If he doesn't do that, if he takes a step back and tries to fight from a distance, I would give him a chance to win this fight. I don't think he's going to do that, though. I think his instinct is to fight inside. So I'm going to go with Gallimore. I think he has more experience. He's got that power to give a young fighter problems. And I actually think that Gallimore is going to score a late stoppage.
Interesting. I'm going with Fundora here, and maybe it's because I'm a fan. Again, look, it's an extremely dangerous bout, but I think he pulls through and wins a decision. I have no idea what's going to happen. I spoke to Gallimore a couple days ago. He's brimming with confidence. He's always brimming with confidence, but he sounds really hungry. I think he's reconnected with his old trainer, George Hernandez, back in Chicago, and he said we're going to see a new, improved Gallimore. But I think Fundora steps up to the plate here. Now, just a reminder, guys, undefeated super welterweight Joey Spencer will be featured in the televised opener of the Fox PBC Fight Night card. And there's going to be some more action when that show ends as boxing continues on FS1 beginning at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, it's time to introduce this week's guest. He is the trainer of unified World Welterweight Champion Errol Spence Jr. and WBC World Super Welterweight Champion Jermell Charlo. So he's quite the busy man these days. Let's welcome Derrick James back to the show. All right, Derrick, first things first, how are you and your family doing?
Hey, man, we're doing phenomenal. We're just, everything is good, man. We're staying safe. My daughter started school today, so my daughters, more than one, started school today, and I'm just kind of cooling with the work this morning. Everything is good, man. We're great, man.
How did you guys handle the pandemic being locked down with the kids and everything?
Well, it wasn't so bad. I mean, my daughters, I hadn't heard them complain one time, so I mean,
Wow.
Well, I know. It's amazing. I mean, it's just kind of like they said that one thing they miss from is travel. Other than that, it's like, okay. So, it's okay. Not a bad deal.
Good to hear. Derrick, do you have a new sense of hunger and excitement to sort of get going again, though, training your guys for big fights?
I do, man. I think that it's not really new. It's just consistent. I think that one of the things that I always focus on is being consistent. We have Errol coming back. We got Jermell coming back. So I think that, it's a new challenge. I mean, this is another title for it's one thing to defend it, but now you kind of like you want something else. So, we're going for another title, 2 more championships and Jermell's fight. So I think that it keeps me hungry, man. With Errol coming back, it keeps me hungry because people don't necessarily want to see you be so successful, but it's what it is, and it's okay.
Yeah, you're a busy guy. I want to take a step back for a second. For yourself, were you able to stay in shape and do the stuff that you would normally do during the pandemic, during the lockdown?
Hey, man, I did it. I ran like 5 days a week, lifted weights. Because what happened is I owned the gym, so I just took the weights from the gym to my house, and nice. I ran like 5 days a week, like I said. Lifted weights, and it was good for me, man. I jumped some rope. It was good. I stayed in shape. And what I would do is every day I would make a video, send out to my guys from the gym and from to Jermell. So just to let them know, this old 48-year-old guy can be doing it. You should be doing it too. So I just listen, man. I lost some weight during the pandemic, so it's a good thing.
Great.
It's impressive. You mentioned you have 2 big fights on the horizon. The first one, Jermell Charlo versus Jason Rosario, Saturday, September 26th, PBC Showtime pay-per-view. Give us your thoughts on Rosario as a fighter.
I think that Rosario's a guy who he can do a lot of things. I think he's a good boxer. He's a pretty good puncher, and I think that he'll be, because he's a different fighter. I would think that Rosario, the contender, would be, different from Rosario, the champion. I mean, the feeling, the prestige, being from a country or whatever. I think that really is his motivation, his inspiration. So I think that, he's a good fighter.
What'd you think of his KO win over Julian Williams?
I thought it was phenomenal. I thought that, I knew that he would be tough because I knew he'd be really tough because I've seen him fight before. I thought that Julian probably would beat him. But, he got that jab in there. That's really what got the party started, was when he was landing those flush jabs. It was kind of like that was kind of it, because he wasn't want to land anything else. When those jabs started landing really clean and really flush, that's when he started to take over. So I was surprised.
Yeah, we know Jermell isn't afraid to go in there and bang. He actually seems to love it. But does he have to be a little bit more cautious than normal facing a guy this powerful, this big of a puncher?
I think that it makes you be more aware, right? So I think that it brings out the best in you, because you have to be very cautious. You have to be, like, all sense of awareness has to be heightened. Everything has to be heightened, because if not, you could walk into a shot, or you could get hit with a shot. So, I think that this is a pretty interesting fight. It's one you have to keep focused throughout the whole way, and I think that's what they'll do.
Right. How has he looked in the gym so far?
He's been looking great, man. He's in great shape. He's weighing like 160, 159, so he's like, 6 pounds overweight. Weight is not an issue. He's in shape, so it's good, real good.
Good. I think a lot of people wonder about how Jermell and Jermall as twins interact. As someone who knows them both, what can you tell us about their relationship with one another?
Hey, man, it's like a big brother, younger brother relationship, even though they are minutes apart. I think that they have a great relationship. It's twin brothers. I think, and really, you can put away all the shenanigans. When you see the way when they fight and how they are there emotionally for each other,
right?
It's amazing. I see them emotionally for each other. So it's like, because regardless of whatever everything else is going on in the world, when somebody's there for you emotionally, that's when they really are there for you. So I think that I see that when I see them together on fight day and all the time they spend together. I see that. So I think it's beautiful.
Wow. Now, this is Jermell's first pay-per-view headliner. Do you sense anything different about him leading up to the fight?
Well, I think that, he wants to make a big show, man. I think there's another, initially when I started training him, this is something that he talked about. So it's becoming a unified champ, and then really be undisputed champ. So I think that this is amazing, man. If you could think about it, I'm an older guy who helps younger men fulfill their dreams and fantasies. And I work hard, but at the same time, it's beautiful to be able to contribute and help guys change their families' lives and provide for their families. And so I think it's beautiful. But I think Jermell is he's focused, man. He's very focused. And this is something that he really wants, because everybody wants to get a pay-per-view fighter. This is the first time I think it'd be great for him.
You just mentioned how focused he is, so there's no concerns at all about him underestimating or overlooking Rosario?
No. Not because he knows he's a big puncher. Listen, man, what keeps you honest is the fact that that guy can punch. The reality is, in boxing, people get hit. You will get hit. Whether if you're not punching or when you're punching. So I think that you have to be very cautious and very intelligent and fight the right fight.
Going back a step, I don't think I ever saw Jermell as happy as when he defeated Tony Harrison in the rematch. What did that win do for him, and how much pressure do you think he was under going into that fight?
I think that, I don't know about, he felt like he beat time, so, we just knew he looked, I just need to throw more punches and let his hands go. And like I remember on the stats, it was like with each round, it was like punching away from each other. But I mean, he let his hands go. But I think that fight did for him. And man, there's nothing like, being a WBC world champ is one thing, but to be the two-time WBC champ, a little bit more to it. So I think that it added a little bit more mystique. I added more to the Lions Only, his whole Lions Only mantra. And I think that, hey man, it makes him feel good. He felt phenomenal.
Yeah, I bet. You've trained at this level before, obviously, with guys like Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia and Shawn Porter. Mikey Garcia and Shawn Porter, on pay-per-view. What advice can you give a guy like Jermell who's never quite been at this level before?
I just tell him to keep focused, stay focused, and don't really get caught up with the numbers and don't really get caught up with all the other things. I think there's all these shenanigans to build a fight. Just to be yourself, man. Continue to be yourself. Be in phenomenal shape. That's it.
Now, speaking of Errol Spence, it's official now. He's going to be defending his WBC IBF welterweight titles against Danny Garcia November 21st on Fox Sports pay-per-view. How has Errol looked in the gym? The $1 million question everybody wants to know.
Yeah, he looks like $1 million. And really, to be honest, that's shortening it. So he looks like $100 million because, He looks phenomenal. He looks great. He's working out. His abs are back. He's ripped up, and he's good. We went back lifting a little weights together today, so he's doing good, man. He's good.
Do you have any idea when he might start sparring? Is it a little too early for that, or what's your take?
Well, I don't know that exactly. But I would imagine it to be like within the September time period or something,
Okay.
Because I think that, sometime in September, I'm sure, because it's like 2 months away from the fight. His condition is great. And like I said, he's kind of in a pre-camp right now. So he's like, I want to be in a pre-camp. But, so he's in a pre-camp. So he's doing well and he's in great shape. And I'm looking forward to it because I think that he was going to show everybody else, how resilient he really is. Because one thing to survive an accident of that magnitude, but to come back and to be able to put on a phenomenal performance against a great fighter, ex-champ, is amazing.
Yeah. Do you have any idea of, how you're going to feel and what kind of emotions you're going to have right before he steps in the ring to spar?
I look at him and I don't really get so emotional about it. I think that because it's so much pressure. Like we talk about pressure like from the fighter, it's a lot more pressure for the trainer too, So, but for him, I think that it won't be too much pressure. I think that it's just sparring. I'm just really, I want to see how he reacts to the punches or whatever. And which is not a big deal. That's what it is. But I won't be too much pressure because it's sparring. But the day of the fight will be something probably totally different. Because it's like big pressure. The whole world is watching.
Yeah.
It's like they're watching him, they're watching me. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. You mentioned that Errol was already ripped. Is he in better shape now than at this point before most of his other fights?
Well, I won't say most, but I'll say in more recent years, like the last year or so, year and a half, yeah. Because he would start training like within 10 weeks or so, which now he's been working since March, the last week of March.
Right. Could that sort of be a blessing in disguise that he'll be able to focus 100% on strategy and that kind of thing instead of getting into shape?
That's right. And not making the weight and everything. It'd be, he looks phenomenal. He can be one-sided, like to mine specifically on strategy and game plan opposed to getting in shape or trying to start to lose weight, so it'd be great.
Great.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
From your perspective as a trainer, give us your thoughts on Danny Garcia.
Hey man, I think Danny Garcia he's a great fighter, and he's like for some reason people always think other people are gonna beat him, but he always prefer man. And if he does lose, it's about like so razor sharp, razor thin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think he's a great fighter, man. He's
Exactly.
he goes out there and he shows and proves him every time he goes out there, and he shows and proves who he really is. So I think that there's no way you could ever count Danny Garcia out because he's a great fighter, great jab, great left hook. I mean, and he has a good team. So I think he has a really good team. So I mean, it'll be great.
How do you see the fight playing out?
Hey man, I only see it one way, So us winning the fight, but I think that I see it as it's gonna be pretty tough, man, because they got a tough guy. It's gonna be a pretty good fight.
So you train two elite guys who are fighting around the same time. I think a lot of people might wonder how do you juggle that? How do you balance that?
And I work a full-time job.
And you work a full-time job. That's right.
And so man, listen, you just have to be in shape. I think to do it. I mean, that's what. I think that's the key to everything is that I stay hydrated and I work out. Like say 5 days a week or so. I think that's what's carrying me over. And to be able to strategize with two different guys is like helps me, as my wife say, multitask. You know what I mean? You need to multitask. So I'll be multitasking. But it'll be good, man. It'll be great.
So these are also two along the same lines. These are two different guys, different personalities. How about managing their personalities and their differences? What is that like going back and forth?
Well, to be honest, I think that's one thing that I play is a great strength of mine because I don't have 20 guys. I don't have, 10, 5 guys or whatever. I think that with each fighter really have like emotional needs that they need, things that they need or things that they like. And so it's not so different because, you're teaching at the same time and you're kind of trying to teach them how to be. You know what I mean? And teach them how to interact and teach them how to be or whatever and how to react to certain aspects of life. So I think that it's one guy never talks to one guy. And really, when Jermell is around Errol, I mean, he cracks jokes all day long. So really, that's what he does. I mean,
right.
Errol's just really, really quiet. So it's like it may be easier to deal with the one who's talking all the time. Because the one who's quiet, you never know what he's thinking. You know what I mean? So he's out there what he's thinking. So I mean, but it's really good. I mean, I because there's only 2 guys, I give Errol what he needs and I give Jermell what he needs also. So it's like I'm not spread too thin because every fighter has emotional desires. I feel like they need to be met or whatever interactions that need to be met. And it's like you can't be there for the fighter if you have too many guys. So it makes it easier.
Makes sense. Speaking of more guys, you've also got undefeated super middleweight prospect Burley Brooks, who I believe is promoted by Errol. Any updates on him, and what are your thoughts on him?
Hey, he's good, man. I think that I hope he's on Errol's undercard. And yeah, he's good, man. He's a good kid. And what's funny is I spend a lot of time with him. So it's like when I travel to go train Jermell and go to the fights, I take him with me. So we kind of get to bond a little bit because, like I said, it's more about the relationships. Because if they understand that they trust you, they believe in you, they know who you are, I think they'll be more willing and more. It's easier to get them to do what you need them to do. If they believe that you're a real fighter, that you're this or that, from my perspective, that the type of guy I am, then it's easier for them to understand, and it helps with our relationship. So when it comes to a point to where it really is fire, and I have to kind of like, hey, we need to pick it up, do this, do that. They believe in it. They believe in what I'm saying because I think that. So it's great, man. It's great.
Fantastic. Derrick, it's always great to have you on the show. Best of luck in these fights and best of luck going forward. We hope to have you back real soon.
Let me know, man. I love what you guys are doing, man. I love Showtime. Steven Espinosa is my guy. I love all of that, man. I love what y'all doing. Y'all do a great job, and I appreciate everything.
Okay, it's time for the week in review. Now, last Saturday, undefeated two-time super middleweight champion David Benavidez impressed again, stopping Romer Alexis Angulo in 10 rounds in the main event of PBC Showtime Championship Boxing. However, Benavidez lost his titles on the scales prior to the bout as he weighed nearly 3 pounds over the 168-pound limit. Mike, let's start with Benavidez's performance. How did he look, in your opinion?
Now, I don't want to be overly effusive because of Angulo, who I think is a physically strong, durable guy, but I think he's a limited boxer. So you shouldn't read too much into Benavidez's performance. But that said, I thought he gave a scary performance. I think he might have the best jab in boxing. Certainly one of the best jabs in boxing. It's quick, it's accurate, it's hard. It's like a power shot. He threw straight, punishing combinations. Just every time he landed, I winced, especially late in the fight. The body shots were painful to watch. I mean, the right to the body was just, oh my God.
Yeah, beautiful.
It really was. And all the while, Angulo could barely touch Benavidez. Actually, I didn't look at the punch stats, but I know that Angulo landed at a really, really low percentage rate. I just thought Benavidez did it all. The one thing he couldn't do is put Angulo down, but I think that's because the Colombian is ridiculously strong, and he has a ridiculous chin. I mean, this guy might have one of the best chins in boxing. He did stop him though. Really, really good performance. I'm higher on Benavidez now than I ever have been.
Yeah, I was very impressed. I thought that Angulo was going to bring it. I thought it was going to be a very tough fight based on what Angulo did to Anthony Sims and the fact that he forced Gilberto Ramirez to box. I mean, he hurt him several times in their fight. So I thought it was going to be a far different fight. But, man, Benavidez, he's an offensive powerhouse. And the pressure he applies, it's the educated throwback kind of pressure. And as you mentioned, his defense isn't bad, especially when you look at his punch output. So I agree with you. I thought he looked damn good. But then you wonder if we'll see him at 168 again. What was your reaction when you heard that he didn't make the weight?
I was just crushed is too strong of a word. I was just like, oh no, you got to be kidding me. You know, things are going so well for him. He got past that. He lost his initial title because he tested positive for cocaine. Came back, won the title, and then all of a sudden this happened. So I was pretty disappointed. I want to cut him just a little bit of slack because of the pandemic, which is screwing up a lot of people. But the bottom line is you just can't miss weight like that. And the fact he missed it by almost 3 pounds is particularly disturbing. Now, I think he proved in the fight, as he said, that discipline isn't a problem for him. You can't fight that hard for that long if you haven't put in the work. I believe 100% that he did put in the work. I just hope he can work out whatever happened and make sure that he doesn't miss weight again. Once again, he did lose, his first title by failing that drug test. He's learning a lot of lessons at a young age.
Yeah.
I don't believe he'll have long-term problems because I think he's actually a really smart kid, but he really has to prove it now. He has to show everybody that all this stuff is behind him.
Yeah, he said all the right things in the post-fight interview with Brian Custer and accepted the blame that he should have been more professional, and whatever folks have to say about him is the truth because he didn't make the weight. But and I think the right word is disappointing because that's exactly what I thought. He says he'll go back down to 168 for the big fights, but I worry about how that might affect him. But for argument's sake, let's say he can make the weight okay. You've got undefeated IBF World Super Middleweight Champion Caleb Plant out there. In your opinion, based on what you saw on Saturday, who wins?
I think the only 168-pounder who can beat Benavidez is Canelo Alvarez. And again, I don't want to go too far, but I even have doubts about that. Listen, I like Plant a lot. He would give Benavidez a much bigger challenge, obviously, much bigger challenge than Angulo did with his skill set. Completely different fighter from Angulo, obviously. He's a really gifted boxer. I don't have to tell you that. He might be the best boxer in the division, except for Alvarez. I just think that Benavidez is underrated as both a boxer and an athlete. I think he has really quick hands. I think he moves well for a guy that big. I think he's got a high ring IQ. You combine that with his physical attributes, and you get a 168-pound Frankenstein. he's just a beast. I don't know if he stops Plant, but I think he breaks him down, wears him down, and I think he wins convincingly.
Wow, I like the prediction. I've seen a lot of that on social media in the past few days since the fight. I think Plant needs to fight the perfect fight to beat Benavidez. I mean, he's got to be on point for 12 rounds for 36 minutes. Here's the thing, though. Plant is the kind of guy who fights the perfect fight damn near every time out. I mean, he recognizes his opponent's weaknesses. He's just excellent, and he stays in the gym and he's constantly getting better. So I don't know, man. It's a tough fight to call, but we're gonna get all into the super middleweights a little later, so I don't want to get too deep now. Let's talk about the chief support on Saturday night. A decision that raised a lot of eyebrows. Rolando Rolly Romero winning unanimously on all three cards against Jackson Mariñez, and about so many had Mariñez winning clearly. Mike, were you one of those people that saw Mariñez as victorious?
Yeah, I shouldn't be surprised when I hear what I think is a bad decision or a bad card. But when I heard Frank Lombardi's 118-110 score for Romero, my jaw just dropped. So even I can still be shocked by the work of some of these judges. I had Mariñez winning 116-112, and honestly, I thought that was a generous score for Romero. I thought Mariñez controlled the fight with his jab. He moved well, I think, which made it difficult for Romero to land those power shots of his. I thought Mariñez outboxed him. I thought he outworked him, not to a great degree, but I think he did outwork him. So, yeah, I was really surprised at the scores. They're talking rematch. I hope it happens. Mariñez deserves it.
Yeah, that 118-110 scorecard just kind of blew me away. You know, when you have one guy who's the A side, you never know what's going to happen. And there were some close rounds there. So I thought, well, who knows what's going to happen on the scorecards. But you're going to give it to Rolando Romero. At least one card should have gone in Mariñez's favor, not all three. And then you tack on a 118-110 card, and it's like, what? Now, to be fair, I didn't score the fight. I hardly do. But I thought that Mariñez won the fight from what I saw. I thought he won the fight clearly. And I agree with you. A rematch is absolutely warranted. Now, I do think it was a learning experience for Romero, who was talking a whole lot as if he was going to blow through Mariñez prior to the fight. And afterwards, he said, well, you can't beat someone who won't engage. You knew he wasn't going to engage 2 months ago. And for the record, I saw Mariñez land plenty of power punches, so I'm not quite, sure about that. But anyway, hopefully we do get that rematch because I believe Mariñez deserves that. Now, in a televised opener, heavyweight action, Otto Wallin, who we had on the PBC podcast last week, won a 5th-round stoppage over veteran Travis Kaufman. The fight was stopped when Kaufman suffered an arm injury, but really, Wallin was dominating. And Mike, I thought he was on his way to a TKO win either way.
I'm with you. I thought Wallin performed well. He's a good he's a good boxer, good methodical boxer. He jabbed well, which set up some nice power shots. He moves well for a guy his size, a big guy, which made Kaufman's job harder. I thought Wallin was on his way, as you just said, to breaking him down and stopping him when Kaufman injured his shoulder. The same shoulder that he had surgery on, which is kind of sad. It's a shame that it ended that way for both guys. Wallin probably could have made a bigger statement, and Kaufman, he might be finished. He had sort of hinted that he might be finished if things didn't go well, so he's probably done. Overall, though, kudos to Wallin. Job well done.
Yeah, agreed. I believe Kaufman said he was going to retire afterwards. Obviously we'll see what happens. He's had quite a good career no matter what happens. But Wallin definitely impressed me. You mentioned the skill set. He doesn't have a lot of power, but he's strong. He can move you around in there in close quarters, and I think he's underrated. Who would you like to see him fight next?
I think he needs to step up to the next tier. I was looking over the rankings. I could see him fighting any of the contenders, guys like Luis Ortiz, Joseph Parker, Oscar Rivas, Derek Chisora, maybe Charles Martin, guys like those. Now those are serious opponents. Those guys would obviously be a test for Wallin. I think he's ready for that. Obviously we won't know until we see it happen, but it looked like on Saturday that he was ready.
Yeah, I like the Charles Martin fight for him. I think it's a nice bout for both those guys. And then after that, maybe Andy Ruiz or Dominic Brazil. Well, to me is about a year away from a world title shot, but I agree with you. I think he can be a player at heavyweight, Mike. All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe to toe. Now, each week we go back and forth on a topic or two, and this week we've got two topics we want to discuss. Let's get into the first one. It's something Mike and I lament all the time, and it's about the lost art of the sweet science, the lost arts, perhaps I should say. And this week we want to talk about specifically what is the most underused, the most underutilized weapon in boxing today. So, Mike, I'll let you begin.
Okay, well, we discussed this a little bit off the podcast. We both agree that it's the jab. I think it's obvious that the jab is generally underutilized, but I was reminded of that when I watched Benavidez on Saturday, and I mentioned earlier that I'm really impressed by his jab. The jab is like a multi-purpose tool that allows you to gauge range. It sets up power shots. It keeps your opponent at a safe distance. It makes it difficult for your opponent to get off shots, particularly when the jab's doubled up. A relentless jab can keep your opponent off balance. It can discourage an opponent. It could have an effect on him mentally. In a Benavidez case, it can also serve as a power shot in itself. I think we saw that on Saturday. You go back and watch. It made me think of Oscar De La Hoya's fight against Miguel Angel Gonzalez many, many years ago. De La Hoya basically won that fight using almost nothing but a jab. It was a brilliant jab, but he used almost nothing from jab. And go back and watch it, you'll see what I mean. For all those reasons and more, it should be the primary weapon, like in every fighter's arsenal. Yet yeah. so many fighters don't throw it consistently. You always hear the analysts, whoever the analyst is, you always hear he has to use the jab more. He has to use the jab more. He's not jabbing. Just too few do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, over the weekend, actually, a fight I watched, not knowing we were going to discuss this, was Ike Corte versus Jose Luis Lopez. Corte had a fantastic jab, and he landed 313 of them. It's a CompuBox record, versus Lopez. And they weren't pity-pat soft jabs either. I mean, thudding, accurate jabs. So like you said, we've discussed it. I'm right there with you. I saw a few days ago a Fight Hype interview where Sean Porter was interviewing David Benavidez, and he brought up a conversation he overheard at Mayweather Boxing Club, and Floyd Mayweather was complaining. And he said these guys just don't know how to jab anymore. And it's true. It's a lost art. Now, that said, Mike, who do you think are the fighters who do use the jab well?
Well, I hadn't really thought about it, to be honest with you. I'd have to think about it. I'd have to go.
I'm going to throw some names out. Okay. You tell me what you think. I first two names that come to mind: Gennady Golovkin.
Oh yeah. Golovkin's got a great
Charlo.
Golovkin's got a great jab.
Golovkin's jab is excellent. And something, we just mentioned David Benavidez. I think he's got a pretty good jab. So does Caleb Plant. I mean, both those guys are really good. And Tyson Fury has a pretty good jab too. I always thought Deontay Wilder had a very good underrated jab, but Fury was able to out jab him. So I mean, there are some guys out there that do the job. But what about body punching though, Mike? I mean, do you think that's an underused weapon today as well?
Yeah, that was my second most underutilized weapon. I think a lot of fighters understand the value of going to the body and they go there. I think a lot also don't, at least not consistently. The benefits are obvious. A consistent body attack wears down an opponent, which makes him less effective as the fight goes on, sometimes stops him. A good body attack can also bring an opponent's guard down, which opens up opportunities to land shots to the head. And of course, the right body shot can end a fight. We see that all the time. More than one boxer has told me that punches to the head don't really hurt. They just kind of make you dizzy. It's the ones to the body that are painful and that basically break you down. That's another thing you always hear from analysts. Go to the body. He's not going to the body. He's got to go to the body. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that either. And I feel like if boxers committed more to body shots, it would greatly affect the outcome of so many of these big fights where you hear the analysts say they need to go to the body. Now, I do think the top welterweights go to the body well, like Errol, Spence, obviously. Other elite fighters, Naoya Inoue goes to the body nicely. And David Benavidez and Caleb Plant go to the body. And of course, Canelo Alvarez, arguably the best body puncher.
Mexicans.
In the game, that left hook downstairs, and Which brings us to our next topic, because we just mentioned several super middleweights, Benavidez, Plant, and Alvarez. And after watching Benavidez do his thing last Saturday, I think it's safe to say that the 168-pound division is among the most competitive in boxing today. You've got Benavidez, you've got Plant, you've got Canelo, you've got Callum Smith. Mike, in your opinion, who is the best of the lot?
I think it's obvious. If you consider Canelo Alvarez a 168-pounder, and I do, I think you have to say that he would be the man to beat. I know he's fought at 168 only once, and that was against a second-tier guy, Rocky Fielding. But he did face a legitimate opponent at 175, I think. And I think he proved he can handle a bigger guy in Sergey Kovalev.
Yeah.
And obviously to me, Canelo is the most talented and the most accomplished of all the guys at super middleweight. At least that's what we know at the moment. I think right now he would handle anyone at that weight. I'm not saying it'd be easy. Benavidez told me that Canelo's people never reached out. For me, it's always going to go back to Benavidez. Benavidez told me that Canelo's people never reached out to him about the possibility of facing him in his next fight, when he was basically reaching out to everybody and their mother. There might have been a reason for that. Maybe they don't like the idea of Canelo fighting a guy that big, that strong, that young, that good at 168. I have no idea. That's pure speculation, but it makes me wonder. I'd pick Canelo to beat Benavidez right now, but I think it could be a difficult fight. And I wouldn't be completely shocked if Benavidez won the fight. And I think a year or two from now, the fight would be even more competitive. I just don't see anyone at 68 beating Canelo. I respect the hell out of Caleb Plant, I really do, but I don't think he would outbox Canelo, which I think he would have to do to win. Same with Billy Joe Sanders, good boxer, no chance. I like Callum Smith's size against Canelo, and he's a good boxer, but no. And that's pretty much it. I see Benavidez as really the only one with a shot at beating Canelo at that weight.
Benavidez is a good choice. I like Caleb Plant too, because he moves, and I think movement gives Canelo some problems. He's not, if there's a weakness in Canelo's game, I think his legs aren't the most athletic of the elite fighters. He does not.
He always gets you. He always gets you though, right?
Yeah, he does. But I think against an elite mover like Plant, he's gonna have some problems. I thought Callum Smith was exposed a little bit in his fight against John Ryder. We saw some of his deficiencies. Now, the thing is this: in a pound for pound debate, obviously Canelo's the guy. This isn't necessarily pound for pound. I mean, Mikey Garcia to me is a top 5 pound for pounder, but I'm not sure he's a top 5 welterweight. So I don't know how good Canelo is at 168. You did refer to the Kovalev fight, which I thought was a brilliant, great win. But I think Benavidez and Plant and Callum Smith can probably beat Kovalev as well. I don't know if Canelo's beaten anyone at 168 for me to place him above those other guys. But if you're talking about resume, I like Benavidez's wins over Anthony Durrell and Romer Alexis Angulo over anyone else's at the weight currently. I think he's the top guy at 168 right now if he can make the weight. I'm not saying that he can beat Canelo Alvarez or he can beat Caleb Plant, but just based on what they've accomplished so far at the weight, I think he's that guy. Callum Smith is up there. Obviously, he has that win over George Groves, but then again, that Ryder performance, I think, drops him a couple notches. Whereas with Benavidez, Darrell was a 2-time champion, and Romer Alexis Angulo had the upset win over Anthony Sims, gave Gilberto Ramirez some problems. Now, I think Caleb Plant's best win, Jose Uzcategui, may be the best of the bunch, but I think Benavidez overall, his resume puts him at number 1.
I can see that. I'm thinking more in terms of who beats who. Yeah, who beats who's actually the best at the weight. Until I see somebody, take Canelo down, I'm gonna go with Canelo. I think these guys are all good fighters. I think that they can give Canelo some resistance. Maybe Plant's number 2 on my list after Benavidez. And I think he would give Canelo some problems. He's naturally bigger than Canelo.
Yeah,
so that always helps. And he's a good boxer, real athletic. So I think these are things that can give him problems. But Canelo in the past has basically caught up to everybody. So I think he would, but I'd love to see it. I wish I could just snap my fingers and make all these fights happen.
Me too. That's exactly what I was thinking. Bottom line, to close out toe-to-toe segment, is that 168-pound division is fantastic, but we need to see them get in the ring and make it happen. All right, well, that concludes this week's episode. Folks, don't forget, Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Fox PBC Fight Night returns with Shawn Porter versus Sebastian Formella in the main event of a triple header. The action continues immediately after with more bouts on FS1. Now, as a reminder, the PBC podcast is available on the PBC website, that's premierboxingchampions.com, as well as all other platforms where you can find podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, also YouTube. So be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast wherever you can find us. Now, we want to thank Derrick James for stopping by, and we want to thank you, of course, for listening to us talk about boxing right here, as always, on the PBC podcast.